can look into it if you would like. It is no rush, but I would be glad to know before I leave for the western capital. Maomao, clever Maomao, placed tea snacks in front of Jinchi and then began jotting a letter. No doubt she would find out about Rikusen, and quickly. When she finished writing, she flapped the page to dry the ink. Then she tucked it into the folds of her robes. Couldn't we simply ask Sir Lahan directly? Baryu asked. His hesitance implied he felt he might be out of line to suggest it. Jinchi frowned. Sir Lahan has already done me several favors. This is including this one, I see. If I am to incur yet another debt, I would rather not go to him as a blank slate. It is better to have some knowledge and pay only for what I cannot get myself. Yes, why yes, of course. Lahan was not perfect, but he did not enjoy dirty dealings. He would have considered them unbeautiful. Still, the fewer favors Jinchi owed, the fewer weaknesses he had that could be exploited, and the better. I'll leave the rest of the paperwork here, Maomao said, setting it down next to the tea. She told him to get back to work in a way that wasn't very subtle. Good, thank you. I'll trade you for this, have a look at it if you would. Jinchi handed her something. She wasn't the only one who could fling paperwork around. Maomao's usually narrow eyes became quite wide. She swept them over the paper several times, making sure she was reading it correctly. Is this true? She asked. And is this happening when you don't need to go to the western capital yourself, Master Jinchi? Not another word. I am well aware of the danger. Foreign nations and natural disasters would not be his only enemies. May I ask what you are planning to do if someone attempts to take your life in a far-off country? Said Maomao. That was the point of greatest concern to her. I will be traveling with picked physicians and warriors for exactly that reason. Yes, I heard you ordered Dr. Liu to get us more capable doctors. What about your bodyguard then? As far as the soldiers are concerned, the soldiers are exactly what I'm concerned about. Are you sure you will be safe with whom you have chosen? Jinchi tugged at his hair. Maomao gave a look that showed she thought that was uncivilized. Chosen, Jinchi echoed. That implies I had a choice. I'm saying, well now, piped up Baryu, glancing at the papers from beside Maomao. Is he really going with you, Master Lakan? Yes, I've asked Sir Lakan to come with me. You've what? Maomao's face contorted in a way Jinchi wouldn't have thought possible. Such open disgust was not typical for her. May I ask what you are thinking? He will go on a rampage. This is terrible. The moment you turn your back you will find his blade in it. I know. And your guards, they are all Master Lakan's men through and through. They can kill you and make it look like an accident. Does he really hate me that much? Jinchi had been under the impression that the strategist had possessed a modicum of newfound respect for him since the Go tournament. Who is going to hold his reins? That is what I want to know. You can bring Master Lakan, but you certainly cannot keep him under control. Then again, if Master Liumen were among the physicians. Ah, Maomao, she knew how the game was played. Not Sir Liumen, I cannot ask him to come. He is not old enough for such a long journey. His bad leg makes it difficult as well. He would be a last resort in any case. Everything had already been decided. Jinchi's actions required a trip to the western capital. Who then? Maomao asked, then she paused. You can't mean it. Her intuition was excellent. There was no need to explain further. If Lahan couldn't come and Liumen couldn't either, that left only so many people. One person in particular was both the best and the worst possibility. You're talking about Maomao. Maomao's face twitched slightly. Jinchi offered her a wan smile, but he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Chapter 13 Jayakuo. The quill in Rikusen's hand ran swiftly over the parchment. How many of these signatures had he written now, in such a compressed form that allowed for quick writing? He sometimes compared his current signature to the original, just to be sure it hadn't changed. Back in the capital, he only needed to press a chop onto a piece of paper. That didn't tire his hand the way this did. He paused to shake out his wrist and looked at the paper. Master Rikusen, would you handle these as well? A functionary arrived with more paperwork. He was the 5th bureaucrat to come here. Rikusen guessed he was from Keiru province based on his slight accent. His earlobes were somewhat large, a shape traditionally associated with blessing. His left shoulder also leaned slightly lower than his right. Perhaps he had a habit of carrying everything on the right side. Thank you. You can put it here, Rikusen said. Yes, sir. This new stuff was, well, busy work. Or at least the governor saw it that way. Most of the people in Ise province lived in the cities along the trade routes connecting the east and the west. This busy work involved petitions from peasants living in the rural areas far from the main trade routes. In villages, not cities, small hamlets mostly, many of the people were farmers of some description. Some herded livestock and others grew grapes. These were things that could survive the arid climate. Some villagers wanted irrigation canals built. Others complained about increasingly frequent nighttime bandit attacks. These attacks left them bereft of their livestock. The wheat harvest had been terrible recently, and several petitions asked for someone to come and investigate. Ha ha ha! Rikyusen was laughing aloud before he realized it, which earned him a mistrustful look from the departing bureaucrat. It had been more than 6 months since he arrived here from the imperial city. He had been sent here, so they said, because they wanted someone who understood the politics of the capital. Yet all he had been given to do was make work like this. The only thing that had changed in all this time was that Rikyusen had gotten better at it and quicker at going through it. This meant he was given more and more of it to do. I almost get the feeling they don't trust me, he grumbled to the empty room, his assigned office. He worked his right hand again. He was starting to feel tendinitis coming on and looked over the papers once more. Even he could detect patterns when given enough paperwork to look at day in and day out. After all, he had, he liked to think, more talents than simply a photographic memory. I make sure to report everything to him, and yet here we are. It was Gyukuo who sent all this work to him. If Rikyusen noticed something but did not report it, he could be dismissed later when there was work to be done. He felt he had been summoned here for that very reason. Gyukuo was the current ruler of the western capital, though perhaps temporarily. If Gyukuan, who had travelled to the central region, decided not to return, then his eldest son Gyukuo would succeed him. Gyukuan had several other children, but none were as strong-willed as Gyukuo. Pardon me. Another bureaucrat appeared with more paperwork. It was not more petitions, but papers Rikyusen had sent to his superiors, and they were being sent back. This bureaucrat worked directly for Gyukuo. Rikyusen had seen him twice before. The first time was during their trip to the western capital last year. The second time was when Rikyusen went to give his formal greetings to Gyukuo. He and this man had seen each other in passing then. These are being returned, the man said. There was nothing written on the papers. There was no signature and no seal. May I take this to mean permission has been denied? Rikyusen asked. Yes, it may be necessary, but there are several more important jobs. We must have our priorities. Well. He could not have been much more clear than that. The corners of Rikyusen's mouth rose and he put the papers in a drawer. There is one other thing, the man said. Yes, Master Gyukuo is asking for you. He does not need you immediately. He suggests getting together for tea when you are done with your morning assignments. If you would be so kind. Although phrased as an invitation, Rikyusen was not at liberty to refuse. Instead he said, but of course, I should come to the open-air pavilion in the central courtyard before the afternoon bell rings. Yes, that's right. Then, with no further evident interest, the bureaucrat left the office. The pavilion was where Gyukuo always liked to have his tea. It was the coolest place available, right beside the oasis. Rikyusen could have guessed that bug-repelling incense was burned there all morning whenever there was going to be tea. This man Gyukuo was by no means incompetent. He had received an education befitting the son of a man of influence. Even Rikyusen could sense a genuine desire, perhaps inherited from his merchant father, to make the western capital a more prosperous place. Gyukuo had an almost unchecked ambition. It had been in his eyes when he was young, and it remained there now. With such ambition came an element of danger. Is this within my jurisdiction as well? Rikyusen asked the empty office. He was often there alone, and he had found he had taken to talking to himself. I would appreciate a few more acquaintances. Remembering people's faces was not just a unique ability Rikyusen possessed. It was also his hobby. Having a perfect memory for every face meant it got boring seeing the same people over and over. Among the paperwork he found bills for silks, gems, and other luxury items. The prices were much lower here in the trade nexus than they were in the imperial capital, but he still stared at them in disbelief. He knew exactly what these resources were being used for. Soon after he arrived in the West, Rikusen met a young woman. She was likely 15 or 16 years old and resembled Empress Gyukayu. When Rikusen asked the bureaucrat showing him around, he learned she was Gyukuo's daughter. The bureaucrat also mentioned almost to himself that they did not look much alike, but he was careful not to elaborate. She was ambitious. Yes, he is that. Rikusen no longer saw the young woman anywhere. She had probably been on her way to the capital for days now. He felt the corners of his mouth lift up again, and then he went back to his work. The quill rushed over the pages once more. Other than his tanned skin, the honorable personage across from Rikusen didn't look much like someone from the western capital. He had a rich dark beard. Aside from some unusually deep wrinkles, he could have been mistaken for a perfectly ordinary person from Lee. His straight hair framed a round face. He was slimmer than most people in the western capital, but he was toned and muscular. This was, of course, Gyukuo. If the father Gyukuan looked like a friendly merchant, the son looked like a warrior. He was in his 40s, but he appeared at least 10 years younger. This was especially true among the people of the western capital, where it was easy to gain weight. His perfect white teeth probably helped him make a good impression. Rikusen looked at Gyukuo's straight front teeth, then averted his eyes. "I am honored by your invitation," he said with a long, slow bow. "Oh, you do not have to grovel. Have a seat." A manservant pulled out a wicker chair and Rikusen sat. There were glasses of juice on the table. "Would you have preferred tea?" Gyukuo asked. "No, sir. Desk work does make one crave something sweet." There was condensation on the glasses. Rikusen wondered if they had been chilled with underground water. "You are trying to be deferential again. Do you think I have some sort of ulterior motive here?" "Ha ha ha, no, but I am nervous." Rikusen chuckled and took a sip of the juice. "I confess, I worry you must be disappointed that I was the best the capital could send. I am in no way suited to your station." "Ha ha ha, my father would never pick the wrong man of that, I assure you. You served under Sir Lacken, didn't you? I'd say that alone is proof of your competence." "Sir Lacken, was it?" Rikusen set down his glass. A whole array of different fruit juices was on the table. "If I may ask," Gyukuo said, getting to his feet and turning around. His gaze settled on a group of merchants. "Is there anyone you recognize among that group?" "3 people, sir," Rikusen said after a second. 2 of them run the caravans that come to the capital each year. The other does his trading primarily by sea. The manservant reappeared and placed writing utensils in front of Rikusen. He put down their names. "I only know the names of the 2. And everyone else in that group is new to me." "Understood. I will have the names checked against our records." Perhaps Gyukuo suspected one of them of something, or maybe he just wanted to test Rikusen's powers of recall. A short while later, a bureaucrat came and whispered in Gyukuo's ear. Gyukuo said, sounding satisfied. He stroked his beard. "Impressive, you were right on both counts. I simply happened to recognize them," Rikusen said with another humble bow. "Funny thing that. You must see dozens or hundreds of faces every day, and yet you remember them. People in the capital claim that members of the La clan are all gifted with rather unusual skills." "Are you sure you are not one of them? It might explain why you were serving Sir Lacken." "What a notion, sir." For the first time that day, Rikusen laughed from the heart. It might have been the funniest thing he had heard since he came to the West. No traveling comedian could have told a joke funnier than the idea that Rikusen might have La blood flowing through his veins. That clan is packed full of people who break the mold, let us say. As for me, what I do is more of a habit. Habit, yes, sir. My mother always told me I mustn't forget people's faces. "Ah yes, I seem to recall you come from merchant stock, don't you?" "I do, sir. To forget a customer's face is to risk a vital business relationship. My mother warned me that to remember was to live." Rikusen's laugh seemed to have dissolved his fear, for he spoke easily now. "It sounds like you had a strict upbringing." "Yes, sir." Rikusen let the moment breathe. He took a sip of the juice. He was remembering the honored strategist's habit of drinking juice when Gyukuo said something unexpected. "Do you suppose Sir Lacken would like that juice?" "You know Master Lacken does not drink alcohol," Rikusen said. "Who does know?" Rikusen was aware that the story was well known. After all, whenever that man passed through somewhere, it was like a typhoon. It fell to Rikusen to clean up after the storm. I'll make sure there's some of this juice available when he comes to the western capital, Jyaku-o said. When he comes here, sir, Rikusen repeated, caught off guard. He suddenly realized he was covered in a thin sheen of sweat. Ah, you are tense again. Yes, I suppose this is the first you have heard of it. Let me tell you a little secret. It seemed they had finally reached the heart of what Jyaku-o wanted to discuss. Sir Lakan is coming to our city, with the imperial younger brother in tow. He almost made it sound like the imperial family member was ancillary. Rikusen forced the corners of his mouth into a smile, but inside he heaved a sigh. Question: how much do 300,000 people eat in a year? Answer: it depends on what they are eating. The answer was so absurd that Rikusen passed through anger and arrived at sheer incredulity. After the abrupt tea party, he had an opportunity to talk with several people, all of them conversant with commerce. He had hoped they might have more thoughtful answers for him. It is impossible to say for certain. The western regions are not as fertile as Ki province. Rice is a far greater luxury here than it is in the central region. He had heard the reasoning. He had heard it many times. It was either rice or wheat or buckwheat. He was looking for possible substitute foods. He wanted to know how much of each they were likely to be able to procure. He had done the calculations over and over, but he wasn't a mathematician. He could not find the answer. To be honest, none of the bureaucrats in the western capital were going to go out of their way for Rikusen. He was often dismissed and treated as an outsider. Sometimes they said someone higher up had stopped them, and other times they claimed they were simply too busy to spare the time. I suppose this is how the Moon Prince always felt, Rikusen said, unable to contain a sigh. For such a young man, that noble was often the victim of Lakan's interference, and he worked hard. Unfortunately, hard work wasn't enough for him. Being part of the imperial family meant you had to shine brighter than anyone else to gain acknowledgement and acceptance. Rikusen trotted back to his office and found a messenger waiting outside. A letter from Ki province, sir, the man said. He gave Rikusen a small box. It was hardly a letter in Rikusen's estimation. The box was kept shut with a string tied in a decorative bow. He had often received such letters in the capital. A variety of esoteric rules governed how the string was to be tied. Once undone, it could not easily be retied. There was a knack to undoing these bows, and Rikusen possessed it. But to be perfectly honest, at that moment, he did not have much energy for such things. Instead, he grabbed a knife and simply cut the knot. Topmost in the bundle was a sheet bearing a wildly stylized, this was a playful little touch Lahan liked to add to his correspondence. Lahan was Lakan's nephew, so they were often working toward the same ends. Rikusen had considered Lahan a friend more than a colleague. However, he reflected ruefully they had only ever discussed work. At least he knew what he was doing. Lahan was a numbers man, and he had provided Rikusen with precisely the data he wanted. For rice, each tan would yield approximately 150 kilograms. This was roughly enough to feed one person for 1 year. The rice yield could be increased if it was mixed with other foods. Detailed calculations showed how adding wheat, soy, or potatoes would affect the yield. Lahan also explained how easily each crop could be preserved, how liquid the markets were for each, and the current market prices. I was afraid he would try to make us buy his potatoes. Guess I owe him an apology. Lahan's father grew potatoes. However, they did not keep as well as rice or wheat. Lahan's family was currently trying to develop ways to make them last longer, or otherwise process them. The winding columns of numbers made Rikusen's head spin. He had no doubt Lahan had organized them neatly. However, it was rare for someone to look at a bunch of numbers and perceive the truth of things. Rikusen had become conversant with numbers as a matter of necessity, but for most people, the ability to parse prices at the shop was all the numeracy they needed. Rikusen flipped vacantly through the pages. Most of it was sheer data, but one page bore an inscription. It read, "Interesting things will happen soon." I guess he knows, Rikusen said. Lakan would be coming to the western capital. Lahan had probably scrawled the note in hopes of giving Rikusen a little shock. Unfortunately for him, Jayaku-o had pulled the rug out from under his surprise. Rikusen smiled as he put the letter back in its box. He picked up the tie he had cut. Now he wished he hadn't. He went through his drawers hoping to find something to replace it with. He found a piece of hemp cord and tied it around the box. He would know immediately if anyone had opened the box and tried to retie it, as long as he remembered how he knotted it. He placed the box in a chest on a bottom shelf and gave a great stretch. Time for a little walk, I think. Yes, he was talking to himself much more these days. He had heard of officials quitting their jobs because desk work had affected them psychologically. Perhaps he was going the same way. First there was a tea party and now a walk. An observer might think he was slacking at his work, but he was normally very diligent.